So you had said when you were at Norfolk State, you participated in a sit-in at a local department store. So what was that like? What was your thought process when you're sitting there? Were you scared that people were really going to hurt you, or was the adrenaline so high it's like, this is something I have to do?
I guess we were more naive, really, because we really weren't afraid. Thinking back, all kinds of bad things could have happened to us, but this was just something that we did and thought we should do in order to be heard and let people know that we did not like the idea of them thinking that we were different from everybody else, that we were somehow less valuable than other people. And I don't think any of us were afraid, really. When you're young, you're very naive, and you think you can conquer the world and nothing bad is going to happen to you. No, I didn't. I was not afraid, because in Norfolk, I guess the atmosphere was not that confrontational. I don't remember us really having any kind of battles in Norfolk when we went and sat in. Only the people inside the store were, of course, very, very upset. And the white patrons were really upset. Of course, they wouldn't sit at the counter even if there had been a space there, since we were sitting there. But we thought we were doing what we should do to express the fact that we did not like us not being able, if we can spend our money, why should we not be able to sit at the counter? Because during those days, they still had the separate bathrooms for black people and white people. We couldn't ride the bus, so we, you had to sit in the back of the bus. I mean, you could ride the bus, and like our theaters, we could go to our separate theaters. In Norfolk, we had separate theaters. I know that in North Carolina, you could go to the same theaters, but I think you sat in the balcony and that type of thing, but you were at least in the same theater at those times. But I don't know whether it's better. I think I like the idea of having our own separate theater as opposed to being relegated to a special place, which suggests that you were less than they, so you had to be corralled someplace. So, but in Norfolk, we didn't go to each other's theater. Except that we did have a light-skinned friend who did go. She was passing for white, so she could go to either one, and she'd come back and tell us what went on in the theater. So,
was their theater nicer than yours, or?
Well, I guess they must have had other amenities and all of that, but it was just like another theater. But I'm sure it was more lavish. I don't know, because I didn't go in it. But when she went in it, she just talked about it was another theater, and they probably had a bigger one. I know it was larger, so I assume it was nicer inside, since I never went into it. But ours was fine. We could see the movies, and we could buy popcorn and other little concessions. So, it didn't make that much difference to us at that time. I said it when we were younger, but as we got older, we realized why those things were separated and did not like the premise upon which they were separated.
So do you attribute your awakening about the inequality to you going to Norfolk State? Is that really where it kind of galvanized?
Yes, it probably started in high school, but did not come to fruition until we were in college, and we talked about the different activities in student government association, because actually in the college you were not taught to demonstrate or anything like that. But as you read through the literature and read about the different ways people were treated and the slavery that took place way back in the day, you started learning and realizing that a great injustice had been done to a whole group of people, a whole race of people, in terms of them being abused and misused throughout most of the lives of some of your ancestors, So, that kind of grew on us as we went to college, and then we read more. So, and I don't remember us talking about slavery that much in high school. The curriculum did not really address it that much, even in black schools back in the 50s and all of that. On your own, you might have read something about it, but they taught to whatever the curriculum was, and I really don't even remember what it was at that time. I know that they skirted talking about slavery. I mean, that was not part of the actual discussion, but I mean, in reading, we read some of the information, so we knew that it existed and where things came from, because our parents also told us about some of those things that went on, and therefore we knew. But in college, we knew that, as adults, we ought to be doing something about it. So I guess it was more realized that we should be doing something to counteract these things. It was mostly in college. In high school, we didn't do anything, not at all. But in the 60s, because I graduated from high school in the 50s, so in the 60s is when I guess it came to full fruition, also with the news media and our Student Government Association talking about it. And as we went places, because like the YMCA, in college, we went to the YMCAs and all that, and they were integrated. There were black kids and white kids when we went down to these conventions and things like that. Our college professors used to take us down to those little conventions and things like that.
Were there pools and at the YMCAs where you all were swimming together?
We weren't swimming. We were, these were like discussion groups.
Okay.
So, no, it might have made a difference since we had been in the water. But, no, they used to have conferences every year where the people got together and they discussed things, but no, we were not in the pool together. I'm sure that would have made a difference.
There were a lot of issues with pools and swimming back then.
Yes, in pools, but I didn't, because I didn't swim. See, I learned to swim in my old age. So,
how was interstate travel when you were going from Norfolk up to Columbia? Did you have issues with interstate travel, or did you have to change? Did it change when you left Virginia?
Well, let's see. When we were going, when I went to Columbia, by that time I had a car. So, and this was still in the 60s. So initially, even though actually I took the bus up to Columbia University the first time I went, because I didn't get a car until I got my master's degree, and still, I'm sure they had you sitting in the back of the bus, I guess, but I don't remember that. That was not an issue in my mind. I guess we just sat wherever we sat on the bus, going to, but I do remember car rides going to, back in the earlier times, that was an issue, but when I went to Columbia, I don't recall an issue. We may have caught the train. I know when I worked on my professional diploma, we had on train, but that was not an issue. You sat wherever you sat. But going down to North Carolina from Virginia was an issue, because there were, service stations. Sometimes they had bathrooms that were for colored only or white only and that kind of thing. And a lot of times there was no place that you could go to the bathroom except on the side of the road. That was about the extent of it. But if you rode a bus down south, you always sat in the back going down to North Carolina. Even Virginia's in the south, but if you went down to North Carolina, you really did sit in the back of the bus for many years. And even though I think in the late 50s or 60s it was supposed to be integrated, you could sit any place you wanted on a bus. And so things changed. I mean, after a while it did change so that, but by that time I wasn't riding buses and things like that. I was driving wherever I wanted to go. Like by 63, I had a car. And didn't notice anything because when I was working on my doctorate in D.C., I didn't have those kind of problems because I lived out in Dale City, and I drove in to George Washington University. That's where I got my degree from, and everything was, such that the law of the land was anyway that things were integrated, and there were no segregation and that type of thing. And, I know some people say that that may not be a great thing with all this integration because some of the values that the separate schools, the separate but equal concepts, that some of the values that were taught are being lost, and all of them going, I don't know, just kind of wild in terms of discipline, because in our household, and particularly in mine, my mother was a strict disciplinarian, and when she told you to do something, she meant for you to do it. It was not that back talk and that back lip. Otherwise, you might get that little backhand, So, but she really kept us home. We didn't, roam the streets like kids now have so much free time. They're out in the streets doing I don't know what all. But that is a product, I say, of integration, where the family unit is not really as strong as it was then. I mean, when dinner time came, you came home and you ate.